Once Aladdin and the princess were married, things started to look good for Aladdin. Aladdin had a palace built for the Sultan to match the beauty of his own palace with the help of the genie. One day, while the Sultan was visiting with Aladdin in the Sultan's palace, they came to a room with a window that was not finished. All the other windows in the Sultan's palace, built by Aladdin, were filled with the most beautiful jewels, gold, and silver. This window had nothing. The Sultan turned and asked Aladdin why this was so, and Aladdin told him that it was because he left this last window for the Sultan to complete, so that the Sultan could have a hand in creating his home. The Sultan was overjoyed that he would have the honor because the rest of the palace was so beautiful. He knew that Aladdin must think highly of his skills. The Sultan sent for the best jewelers in town, and for 6 weeks they went to work building and trying to finish the window. The jewelers came back to the Sultan and told him they had no jewels that could match the type of jewels or gold in the other windows. The Sultan told them not to worry. The Sultan gave the jewels that Aladdin had originally gave him when Aladdin was asking for the princess's hand in marriage. With these jewels that matched the quality of the rest of the windows, the jewelers went to work. Again, they worked for another 6 weeks, but again, their craftsmanship was no compare to the genie who originally built the palace. Aladdin, seeing that the jewelers were having such a hard time, told them to remove the jewels and give them back to the Sultan. Once the jewelers gave the jewels back to the Sultan, he asked them why Aladdin had returned them. The jewelers said that Aladdin gave no reason. Aladdin summoned the genie and thanked him for leaving one window unfinished. Then he told the genie that it was time to make it like the other finished windows in the house. With that, the genie was off, and in no time the window was finished, looking of the same quality as the others. The Sultan returned with Aladdin to the window, and the Sultan asked him why he sent back the jewels, and to the Sultan's surprise he saw that the window was finished to the same quality as the other windows in his own palace. The Sultan thanked Aladdin for his quick and incredible work, and told him that there was not another person in the world like Aladdin. Aladdin never stayed long in his own palace. He was always taking day trips around the town, visiting various mosques, shops, and continuing to study the world around him. Every time he went out into public, he would have 2 of his slaves come at each side of his horse and throw coins to everyone he passed. Everyone loved Aladdin, for they knew he was a kind person. 7 years had passed, and Aladdin and the princess were still in love and doing well. This entire time, the sorcerer did not think about Aladdin once. He assumed that he had died in the cave where he left him. It just so happened that the sorcerer began to worry and wanted to make sure that Aladdin had died in the cave. So the sorcerer made many spells and incantations and was able to create a horoscope. With this horoscope, the sorcerer was able to find out that Aladdin had indeed not died in the cave, but he was able to make it out with the aid of the genie. The sorcerer also saw that he was now married to the princess and lived in a palace beyond compare. The sorcerer was furious and knew that it was because of the genie that Aladdin was able to be doing so well. The sorcerer made his way back to the city where Aladdin was and began to formulate a plan on getting the lamp with the genie into his possession. The sorcerer went to the palace and talked with the servants. In casual conversation, the sorcerer learned that there was a room Aladdin kept to himself with a lamp that Aladdin had instructed never to be touched. Once the sorcerer heard this, he ended his conversation and left. That night the sorcerer went to the metal worker and asked him to make 12 of the best quality brass lamps and to make sure that they were polished and shiny. The metal worker told the sorcerer that it would take him a full day to complete. The sorcerer told him that it would be fine, but to have them ready. The sorcerer the next day went back to the palace and inquired about the whereabouts of Aladdin. The servants told the sorcerer that Aladdin was out hunting, and it would be several days before he returned. The sorcerer thanked them for this information and returned to the metal worker to pick up his new brass lamps. The next day, the sorcerer returned to outside the palace with a basket filled with his lamps and began to shout out to the crowd that he would exchange old lamps for new lamps. If anyone had an old lamp, he would trade it for one of his new ones. It wasn't long before a crowd began to form around him. Everyone was making fun of this old man with the lamps. Eventually, the sound of the crowd became so loud that the princess took interest. She asked the servant what all the sound was about, and the servant told her that it was an old man exchanging new lamps for old ones. The princess instantly remembered the old lamp in Aladdin's room, and she told a servant to go and get it in exchange for a new one. The servant did what the princess told her and went to the sorcerer and exchanged it for a new lamp. The sorcerer knew that this servant came from Aladdin's palace, and he knew that the lamp she gave him was the lamp of the genie. After the sorcerer saw the servant leave, he dropped all the other lamps and took the genie's lamp with him and left the streets. Once night fell, the sorcerer took out the lamp and rubbed it. Once the genie appeared, the sorcerer told it that he wanted the palace and everyone in it and himself to be transported back to Africa. The genie did as he was told, and with that the palace, the people, and the sorcerer were gone and back in Africa. The next day the Sultan went to look out his window, and to his surprise he saw that his neighbor, Aladdin's palace, was gone. The Sultan didn't know what could have happened that would make it there one day and gone the next. The Sultan turned to his advisor and asked him what could have caused this. The advisor never liked Aladdin, so he told the Sultan that the palace must have been created with dark magic and that Aladdin could not be trusted and must face the crimes for his deception. The Sultan, now angry for being deceived, told the guards that they must go out and find Aladdin and bring him back to him. Once the guards found Aladdin, they brought him back to the Sultan. The Sultan, who was so angry, told Aladdin that he would be killed for his deception. The Sultan never let Aladdin speak or offer any explanation. Once the people of the city found out that Aladdin was to be killed, there were riots in the street. The people loved Aladdin for his acts of charity throughout Aladdin's life, and they did not want to see him killed. The Sultan, not wanting the riots to continue, decided not to kill Aladdin. Instead, he let him try to explain himself. Aladdin told the Sultan that he had no idea who stole his palace, and asked that if he could be given 40 days, he would bring it back. The Sultan told him that on the 40th day he must return, and if he failed in finding the palace and the princess, then he, Aladdin, would be killed. Aladdin went throughout the town and tried to meet with his friends. None of them would talk to Aladdin. Aladdin went deep into the forest. He was so frustrated that he punched the ground. After hurting his hand, he began to rub it, and to his surprise, the genie of the ring he was wearing came out. The genie asked Aladdin if he wanted anything, and Aladdin, so happy that someone had come to his aid, told the genie that he wanted his palace and all the people in it back in the city. The genie of the ring told Aladdin that he could not do it, because it was the work of the genie of the lamp. Aladdin, thinking fast, told the genie of the ring that he would like to be taken to the location where his palace and the people were. With that, Aladdin was instantly transported into Africa, where his palace and people were. The princess, who just so happened to be looking out the window of the palace, saw Aladdin appear and waved to him. Aladdin saw her and waved back. The princess sent for a servant to go let Aladdin into the palace, the back way. Once Aladdin made it into the princess's room, they were overjoyed with the reunion. The princess asked what was the cause of this horrible problem, and Aladdin told her that it was because of the lamp, and that he had to get it back. The princess admitted that she thought it had to do with the lamp. Aladdin and the princess came up with a plan, and once it was finished, Aladdin left the palace in secret and made his way into the town. Aladdin convinced a poor man to change clothes with him. In this new disguise, Aladdin went to the apothecary. There he asked for a certain powder. The apothecary, thinking that Aladdin was poor and could not pay for it, told Aladdin that it was very expensive. Aladdin showed him the money he had, and the apothecary measured the powder and gave Aladdin the amount he wanted. Aladdin paid him with 1 gold coin, then left. Once Aladdin was finished with all this, he made his way back to the palace. Again, the princess saw him coming and told the servant to let him in the back way. Aladdin came to the princess's room and told her the rest of the plan. This time, when the sorcerer came to spend time with the princess, she would pretend to like him. They would drink wine together, and then once she put the powder into her cup, she would exchange it with the sorcerer. The sorcerer would gladly do this because he would see it as a sign of affection from the princess. Once the sorcerer fell asleep, then she would call Aladdin to her. The plan begun, the sorcerer came to spend time with the princess, and she pretended to like him. They began to drink, and she slipped the powder Aladdin had received earlier that day into her cup, and she exchanged it with the sorcerer, who was happy to have it. The sorcerer drank it, and it wasn't long before the sorcerer fell asleep. The princess called Aladdin, and he came into the room. Aladdin searched the sorcerer's clothes, and that's where he found the lamp. Aladdin took the lamp in his hand and rubbed it, and the genie of the lamp came out. Aladdin told the genie that he would like to have himself, the palace, and everyone in it transported back to its original home in China. The palace arrived in the middle of the night, and the princess and Aladdin rested. The next day the Sultan was looking out of his house, sad that the princess and Aladdin was gone, and hoping that he would not have to kill Aladdin. Once the sun rose, he realized that he could see the palace of Aladdin. The Sultan was so overcome with joy that he told his servants that he needed a horse right away, and with that the Sultan took off to meet Aladdin and the princess in their home. Once the Sultan arrived in Aladdin's newly returned palace, the family was happily reunited. The Sultan was overjoyed to see his daughter the princess again, and told Aladdin that he was sorry for the way he treated him. As it turned out, the sorcerer had a younger brother. Every year, once a year, they would travel from wherever they were to meet each other. This year, the old sorcerer never met with the young brother. The young brother was just as powerful and as good as the old sorcerer with magic, so the young sorcerer created many spells and incantations and created a horoscope. He used this horoscope to find his brother, and to his surprise and anger, he found the old sorcerer dead. The young sorcerer looked into the past to find out who killed the sorcerer, and that's when he found out it was Aladdin who got the poison. The young sorcerer found the location of where Aladdin lived and set out on a journey to get revenge.